So let's walk through the steps of you start a small business, or you or anybody watching this, you start a small business. I'm just using this as a jumping off point. You start a small business and you start to grow a little bit and you start to get really busy and you start to get busy enough that you're like, man, I need to maybe hire somebody. Well, the question is, did you factor that in to your pricing model to be able to have growth? There's an entire, I think it's like a 5-part episode of The American Office that covers this. And this is kind of accounting 101. At a certain point, if you're going to grow, you have to have enough profit margin in there to be able to bring in employees. Because remember, we compete for 2 things in business. What are they? 2 things in business that we compete for. Number 1 is the obvious. That's for our customers. Of course we want customers. But we also have to compete for labor. Labor is a market like any other market. And this has all been forgotten. Now keep in mind, everything I'm talking about, like this has all been completely forgotten. Like nobody teaches this anymore because it's all about just go to the government and get the government to give you a no-bid contract, so that you can sell them mil-spec popsicle sticks for $600 a stick or something. Like that's modern business now. And there's nothing free market about that. There's nothing really there's nothing demand economy about that. That's nonsense. And it's not sustainable. None of it is. This is just like I mentioned, like my commie followers all think that capitalism is unsustainable. My capitalist followers all think that communism is unsustainable. And they're both right. Neither one of them are really sustainable when it comes to central banking, which they both have in common. So you walk through your business. Let's say that you're the owner and you are growing your business. And let's say for a second here that you actually have a hard money economy. So you do price that in. You do price in that, okay, if I'm going to grow, I have to have my prices structured as such that I can actually hire people, and not just hire people, but hire people and pay them enough that they would want to come and work for me. That like they have to want to be here and they have to want to work in my shop, because otherwise they're always going to have one foot out the door, right? That's today. That's right now in this world. Like everybody's got one foot out the door, no matter what job they're in. It doesn't make any difference what job they're in. They're always looking for something else, the next better deal. And that kind of ruins a division of labor because then nobody really gets good at anything. And you need about 10,000 hours, between 5 and 10,000 hours to get really, truly good at something. This is why there is no such thing as unskilled labor if you really understand what labor actually means. I mean, sorry, capitalist douchebags, but like, dude, that is how it works. If you want to get good at something, like would you hire a guy to play a guitar at your wedding who has 25 minutes of experience? Probably not. That wouldn't go well, I don't imagine. Would you hire Eddie Van Halen? Probably. Eddie had something like what, 60,000 hours? Yeah. So you see the problem here? Anyway, so you have to price all that stuff in. The giant monolithic mega corporations nowadays don't do any of that. It's all about just lower price, lower price, lower price. And the argument is that, well, look, it's expanded everybody. Everybody's got more stuff. Yeah, everybody has more stuff, but at what cost? Because a lot of stuff is getting to the point where most people don't care about the stuff. They're like, dude, I'd like to own a piece of the country and be able to have a family. Yeah, a lot of the stuff doesn't really matter at that point. This is where you have a lot of Gen Xers and a lot of millennials starting to question, what the hell is the point of all of this? Yeah, it's because it's like, yes, you're just bringing a bunch of stuff that doesn't really always translate to quality of life. Yes, air conditioning does. Yes, home ownership does. And home ownership meaning like, and of course, when I talk about ownership of land, I'm talking about like actual ownership, not this nonsense that we pretend is ownership nowadays. The point being is that when you expand your business and you keep going, eventually, in a lot of cases, if we follow the pathology, the owners kind of get tired and say, man, all I'm doing is working. There's a great, I think it's Aesop that tells this story about the guy who finds the genie and he says, I want to wish for land. And the genie says, very well, you can have whatever land you want that you can work in one day. So the guy, thinking he's being really smart, waits till the longest day of the year, June 21st, for those of you keeping score at home. And he goes and he works this land as hard as he can possibly do it on June 21st to get this big piece of land. But then realizes later on in the story that like he can't maintain all of that, right? Because like, yeah, you did it one time at the longest day, but now you have shorter days and you still have to try and work all of this land. And and eventually you work yourself into an early grave. And that was kind of the moral of the story. So what happens with a lot of businesses is that, especially in the beginning, is they're really excited, they make a lot of money, they're doing really great, and they start to grow, and then eventually becomes more of a burden. Now, what's supposed to happen, this is what would happen in a hard money economy, is that the owner would either pass that on to his heirs and have them destroy it and run it into the ground, which is what usually happens, especially by the third generation, and then it goes away, and shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves by the fourth generation. That is normal. That's normal development, actually. That's actually not a bad thing. That's a positive thing. You want that. You don't want fourth generation trust fund kids running the world. We have that right now, and it's not working out well. So, no, that's what would happen in a small business. And, he would just take his money and go do something else, right? This is the Dread Pirate Roberts, right? Like, I'm not the real Pirate Roberts. He wasn't, and the guy who trained me wasn't him either. No, the real one was long gone, years, retired, and moved on. Yeah, that's normal. That's normal and healthy in a lot of small businesses. Now, the idea is that, well, but then where's the consistency? There isn't any consistency. That's actually not a bad thing, because consistency that you're seeing now, especially as it drones on throughout the decades, everything turns into a gray box. What are we seeing right now? Just a gray box. Yeah, it's efficient. That's it. You show up to Burger Douche at the gray box and they give you this food substitute. Right? So, no, you're supposed to have that. Remember, this is all part of the circle of life. Not to get all Disneyland about it, but I mean, yeah, that's really kind of how it works. They start off and then they grow, and then eventually you have this this sort of toppling of the greatness. The guys who just say, dude, I'm tired, man. I'm going home. I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah, that's normal. You're not supposed to have somebody just constantly keeping that system alive. That's not good at all. That's how you lock everything up. That's why we have a locked up economy right now. That's why you have no social mobility. Remember, we've talked about this in the past. Social mobility has two aspects to it. The first part is the part we all love. It's the part where you start at the bottom and you work your way up. The other part is you start at the top and work your way down. That's the Martin Scorsese version of it, right? Like that's how this works. And so, yeah, I mean, if you don't have that cycle, you just have everything locked up. And right now everything's locked up, and it's because of all the money printing. In a hard money economy, if there wasn't any of that, you'd have businesses starting off, doing really well, making a lot of money, and then eventually the owner just retiring, giving it over to his heirs who run it into the ground promptly, or maybe he trains an apprentice and then gives it to that person, or that person buys him out, and then just keeps the brand alive, but has to maintain the quality with it. That's the part that's missing right now all over the world, right? Is the quality. The quality of everything is garbage. And it's because all it is just, well, we're just keeping the name alive. That's it. It's just, it's Weekend at Bernie's. Just keep the corpse animated. It's not, it's not real, right? That's why you're seeing this. That's why there's no life in anything. That's why you see that even in the people. Even the people you walk to, how many videos have you seen on TikTok recently in the last, year or so, where someone talks about, man, why is it that I'm walking around and I say hi to someone and they just go, oh. Yeah, they're zombies. It's because that feeds into everything. Everything downstream of the money becomes toxic if the money's toxic. Everything. The people eventually becomes toxic. All the relationships become toxic. That's why men won't date women anymore. Yeah, everything becomes toxic as a result of that. It's all very predictable stuff. It's civilization ending. But yeah, I mean, it sounds as though that the small guys would go out of business. I'm answering your question. I just have to go a long way around to do it. But that's not what happens. The big guys really can't compete with the small guys. They can't. That's why they have to have all this endless amounts of largesse, because they really can't compete with small guys who do it right.